the second show of this afternoon, which is a long film, one of my favorites, and I say one of our favorites, and I say, and I'm pleased to introduce Professor Andreas Stuhlmann from the Hamburg University, and who asked who is the author, actually who is the co-author of to me, an important book about Douglas Sirk, which was to me kind of a discovery of, I believe, a pioneering research about Sirk's theatrical origins, Sirk's family, etc. I think there was a very interesting research there that was, to me, extremely productive. So I'm glad to give him the word.
Buonasera signori e signori. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. But most importantly, welcome fellow Sirkians. And thank you so much, merci beaucoup, Bernard, for your kind words and very generous words. They mean a lot. Books are hard work, as those of you who do write know, and it's great to somebody you respect and whose work you know likes the book. So I'm very glad. I'm glad to be here. Glad to welcome all of you. It's a great turnout. So it's great that this film is part of the retrospective. And I just learned that it would have been part of the retrospective anyway, and I'm really glad that it happened. This retrospective has been a long time coming, but I'm not here to talk about retrospective in general, but to take you right now into the film itself, because there's a lot to unpack, and I want to be brief. A Time to Love and A Time to Die is a film from 1957, filmed in 1957, released in 1958. And it's part of what we could call the third act of Sirk's career. He was a man in his 50s. He had made an enormous amount of movies up to that point, but he didn't know that he would actually not much longer be making movies in Hollywood. And he's at the height of his artistic career, his craft. He is at the height of his artistic freedom within the studio system, and he had been fighting for that freedom for a long time. And this film, is also, it means a lot to him himself, but we'll get to that. You've heard many superlatives about certain Sirk films already. You've heard about the first film he ever made, about the most important film he ever made, about the best film he ever made. And I have two superlatives for you as well. It's his most personal film, for sure. And it's also his only real anti-war film. In spite of the many legends that Sirk told about his own life, we know for sure that he actually fought in the war, but not in the First World War. As a young man, he was drafted. There was a brief flirt with disaster, and he was able to get out very quickly. And also, unlike many other men, he was able to actually immediately start his career. As Bernard has already said, he started in theater, and he began immediately after the war to work in theater again. That was not a given to many other people of his generation. The theater work has informed his work a lot, but in many ways he wouldn't be the craftsman and the good director that he is if he hadn't started in theater. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. Only that the soldier characters in this film differ from all the other characters in his work. And especially in his other films and mostly in his theater work, soldiers are often mere representatives of a certain worldview, of a certain social class, of a certain ideological stance. And here, we see a very different young soldier. My own fascination with this film began with a photo. And it's a very iconic photo of Sirk. It was taken in 1957, and we see a man in an elegant suit, like laser dark stacks, with fedora, the scarf, and he sits on a piano stool, and behind him there is an enormous amount of rubble, just burned out houses and a broken piano, and two very frightening steel beams that cut across the photo. And that photo was taken at the shooting of this movie in 1957 at the former Wehrmacht's shooting range in Grafenwöhr, Bavaria, which by that time had been taken over by the Americans, and the Americans generously lent it for the filming. This photo obviously made me curious. Where is that? What happened? You know, and that's how I discovered the film. And those of you who know the German edition of John Halliday's amazing interview book, that's the photo on the cover. And if you look closely at 24 minutes 30 in the film, you'll see that very same shot. Just without Sirk in it, of course. He's behind the camera at that point. Sirk made the film for Universal. Those of you who have followed the retrospective know that this is a studio he'd been worked for a long time, from 51 to 58. This is his second last film for Universal. He will end up making more than 20 films for that one studio. And he was given an enormous budget for this film. He was allowed to use CinemaScope and Kodachrome for this, which is a privilege that you have to earn in Hollywood at the time. So, you know, the screen is a little wider, the image is a little wider, and the colors are a little brighter than you might have it otherwise in other technical circumstances. In spite of working in Germany, he was able to bring his most trusted team members with him. Russell Matty at the camera, set designer Alexander Gollitzen, and sound engineer Leslie Carey are part of the crew. And in spite of all the technical things I've just mentioned, in my favorite article on the film, that is a 50-year-old article by Fred Kemper on this very movie, Kemper talks about how stark and drab and relatively limpid, and that's a quote from Kemper, the film looks. The surface of each image, the surface of the cadrage, seems to absorb everything that is placed in front of the camera. It's a huge, bland canvas which sucks in everything that happens in all the action. So Kemper goes as far to say, even cause and effect relations are disappearing, and all we see is this vast canvas, and we see little, creatures acting in front of it. And so the characters are not only void of intention, of deeper psychological meaning and historical reasoning, but this all contributes to the effect that Kemper calls the deepest level of human despair that Sirk ever achieved in film. And that was another superlative, and promise now we're done with the superlatives. So, who are these characters? Very briefly, we see two protagonists. One is Ernst Gräber, a young Wehrmacht soldier coming back from the Eastern Front on furlough, trying to find his family, and he meets instead of his family, he meets Elisabeth Kruse, the daughter of a doctor who defied Nazi propaganda and who's in trouble for that. As you can imagine, a love story ensues, but in spite of whatever they do in saying or what they're planning, in spite of all their hopes and dreams that we see blossom in this film, literally blossom in the film, and you understand what I mean in a second, the iron wheels of fate will eventually mercilessly, precisely crush whatever they do. And this, of course, crushing brutality of fate is another thing that is very common in Sirk's film, especially of that period. Kemper called this film, exactly for this reason, better than his favorite, and I think almost everybody else's favorite, The Tarnished Angels. He said this is even more precise and even more daunting than in The Tarnished Angels here. One of the few critics who actually loved the movie beyond any other is Jean-Luc Godard, the French director, who even defended this film against criticism and comparison with the other big anti-war film that Universal had produced. And that, of course, is All Quiet on the Western Front, which they had done in 1929, and which is, of course, about World War I. And what the both films have in common is that the book is by the same man. They're both based on books and novels by Erich Maria Remarque, the German writer, exiled writer, whom Sirk met in Hollywood and who became a close friend. But that was not the reason why Sirk was so adamant to do this picture. One last word about the question of despair. This beautiful desolation, or this desolate beauty, however you want to put it, has become a trademark of this long line of Sirkian directors that we know, right? From Roger Waters to Catherine Bigelow and Todd Haynes, Pedro Almodovar in contemporary filmmaking, or my countryman, fellow Hamburgian Fatih Akin as well. I would differ from Fred Kemper in one account. He calls Sirk a fatalist. I would say he's an existentialist. His characters, like the ones in Camus or Sartre, they keep pushing the boulder up the hill, even though it comes crushing down. And they find this tiny moment of heroism just right before the boulder gets to them. Sirk had no real illusions about that Germany had changed when he came back. He had come back in 1950 only to see that many of the old Nazis were still running the show. And he had, when he was hiring actors for the film, he met many people whose career had followed and whose career had been, unlike his own, uninterrupted in West Germany. So we will see Agnes Windeck, Dieter Borsche, Dorothea Wieck, and many others who were established Ufer stars before 1945, and now they play in this very strange Sirkian war film. You also recognize Klaus Kinski, Barbara Rütting, and Charles Denier in the cast. But since we're going to start any second now, I just want to draw your attention to one of these characters. You're going to meet her. She's the block warden in the house where Elisabeth lives. Her name is Frau Leiser, and this actress is Dorothea Wieck. Dorothea Wieck has also been a big Ufer star, or medium-range Ufer star, and she starred in famous films as in Mädchen in Uniform in 1931, and in 1942 she played the mother of Douglas Sirk's own son in a movie called Kopf hoch Johannes. Sirk had a son with his first wife, Dorothea Brinken. They got married in 1925 when Sirk was still in theater. And in 1929, Ms. Brinken decided to join the Nazi party. And when her husband, or then ex-husband, because they divorced the same year, married a Jewish actress, Hilde Jari. He was his loyal companion for the rest of his life. Ms. Brinken actually went so far as to bar Sirk from any contact to his son. So the only chance that Sirk actually had to see his son was actually go to the movies and see him and actually film his mother, then had him cast to play young Hitler youth boys. And for the longest time, Sirk did not know what had become of his son, because he then went into exile, there was no communication, and his son was lost. And it was only in the mid-50s, when he was preparing to come back to Europe to do this film, that he found out that his son had actually been shipped, at the age of 19, to the Eastern Front, to Ukraine, and had quickly perished there, like so many other young men. And in a second, you'll understand why then this film here now is so personal to Douglas Sirk. A last question: how did this film do? Was it a big success? Was it a big hit? And to answer that, I will give you two things. I'll give you the number of dollars that it raised in its first year. It was $1.6 million. Universal was said to have spent around about $3 million on that film, and so that was a great turnaround for them. Also, I give you just a few titles of other films that came out that same year, and you'll know all these films. The highest grossing film this year was The Bridge on River Kwai. Then there was A Farewell to Arms with Rock Hudson, who was Sirk's obviously preferred male lead, and he's not in this movie. There was Vertigo by Hitchcock. There was The Sun Also Rises, and there was The Cat on the Hot Tin Roof. So yes, there was stiff competition, and it was an amazing year for film. One second, I should spend like half a minute to point out the Swiss connection, and everybody who's old enough will understand as soon as the film begins what I'm talking about. The female lead is played by no other than Guido Pulver. And it was her big break internationally that she was able to get the leading role in this film. So I had another actress in mind, but that's a different story for another time. Guido Pulver got the role, she plays beautifully. And now I can only wish you a great screening, and I thank you much for your attention.